Good evening. This is the Surplus Property Facilities Advisory Committee meeting. It is 6 o'clock, and we are starting specifically. There's a couple of announcements I have to read. One is Heather Bettini will not be joining us this evening. I got advice that she is not going to be in attendance. The attendance is going to be recorded by our administrative aide, and I need to read an announcement about recording this so everyone's aware of what the rules are. Welcome to the Surplus Properties Facility Advisory Committee meeting. We want to note that this meeting is being broadcast on the NUSD's YouTube channel. The broadcast may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. If you would like to make a public comment on an item in the agenda or not on the agenda, please see staff at the side of the table for a public comment card. And so far, I have one public comment card for item number 4. If anybody else wants to make a comment, then we're set up. Okay, so the meeting's been called to order at 6 o'clock. The first item on the agenda is to approve the agenda as we do our business tonight. So I need a motion to approve the agenda as presented. So I need a motion from a member and a second.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. And a second, Derek Klein seconds. And I need a vote of the membership. So for the order of business, all in favor? All in favor, none opposed? Okay, so we're now going to follow the agenda as printed. The next item is any public comment. If there's anybody who wants to make a public comment not for an item on the agenda tonight, I need a comment card now. I expect none because this is not a general board meeting. We're very specific topic tonight. So having heard none, we will move on from that. Okay. We now need to move to a public hearing. And this is an official process where I gavel in the public hearing. I take comments, if any, and then we'll close the public hearing, and then we'll have some other opportunities later. But this is, if you want to get on the record, either for or against this issue, this is the time to do it. So I'm going to open a public hearing. Public hearing is now open. I'm hearing no. Is this a public hearing comment? Public hearing, sir. Don. This is your chance. Thank you, sir.
I'd like to specifically talk about the San Andreas school site.
And into the microphone so the people publicly.
I'd like to specific.
Yep, good. So everybody can hear you.
Sorry.
Good.
I'd like to specifically talk about the San Andreas school site. I'd like to read just one paragraph. It's a conclusion of an exhaustive study that was done in 2018 on the site. It brought in all sorts of everything from, it's a flood zone. There was a leak from the old Chevron station that permeated the land, et cetera, et cetera. This one, however, deals with the cultural significance of the site. And it states, one historic site and 2 prehistoric isolated artifacts were identified within the ADI. The ADI is the site. Novato Creek is 1,140 feet southwest of the ADI, and 5 prehistoric sites have been located within 0.25 mile radius. 2 isolated prehistoric flake sites were observed within the ADI. A geoarchaeological analysis also indicates the potential for buried historic resources in moderate to high. Based on limited ground visibility, the proximity of nearby archaeological sites and water, the presence of prehistoric isolates within the ADI, and the potential for buried archaeological deposits, subsurface testing is recommended prior to future ground disturbing activities in order to determine the presence or absence of buried archaeological resources. Based on the identification of sacred lands in the vicinity of the ADI that are listed in the NAHC Sacred Lands File, Native American consultation is also recommended prior to any ground disturbing activities. So with that as a potential for archaeological historic items that are in the site, plus the fact that it's in a flood zone, plus the fact that there may be still potential oil leaks in the site, plus the fact that there are also, I had Audubon come out there, there's potential, I won't say endangered species, but protected species on the site. I don't know why the school district nor any potential developer would want to take that on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Pardon me, thank you very much. Sir, do we have one more speaker? Two more. Okay. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Mike Jolly. For 40 more years, I've lived near the San Andreas site, up on Upper San Ramon, so I'm familiar with the site. It's a beautiful piece of property. It has lain fallow and abandoned, basically, for the 60 years since this district was given it as a school site. And I think, as a citizen, I feel that property could be and should be better used for the capital and income needs of the neighborhood and for the community. There's a lot that could be done there. I would trust the school board to, whatever the deed and finish the property to be used for, that it would be used, integrated honorably and well into that wonderful neighborhood that's in the middle of the San Marin community. It's a great piece of property, and it should be being used for our community. And I'd encourage the committee, if they want to deed it surplus, fine. Just let's get going on using the property instead of leaving it like a blight in a beautiful neighborhood and a wonderful community. So I wish you all the best in making the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Damien Morum, Morazumi. Thank you, sir.
I am relatively new to the San Andreas Drive. I've been there maybe 2 years, and one of the reasons that we did move into that area was because it was a quiet area, and that we did look over the undeveloped area that is right across the street from our house. I am, unlike the previous speaker who I don't know, I'm not as just willing to just trust the school board to do what they want with that land. I hear animals out that out my window every night. I hear things in the morning. I'm aware of the oil spill or the gas spill. I've tried to get information, but the only testing that was done was 30 years old. And there is no new testing, and I do have a little bit of experience in the testing of those through a litigation site where those are done, and plumes of water do follow certain areas, and we have had quite a bit of rain. But the main thing is that we have a lot of wildlife out there. The people in my neighborhood walk their dogs, they use that area, and only thing that I've seen that I can find online, which is maybe my own fault, is that there is going to be potentially three-story rental buildings, and nothing is said about the infrastructure that also needs to accompany when you have that type of construction or that type of population moving on. Not to mention there's nothing about the wildlife and all of the animals or insects or whatever is out there that's making all that noise and creating that potential, that neighborhood possibly to be like that. Mm-hmm. Also, I understood from coming to other meetings is that a lot of these places or a lot of these buildings are for low-cost housing or housing for school teachers or maybe to provide for others. I haven't seen any studies on that either, that people would even want to take jobs for that, and I don't see the possible benefit, cost analysis benefit. But I have been in cities where they have built large subdivisions and put them in, and the same thing generally happens when I see them, is there's no infrastructure, the schools are not increased, we're not even able to keep some of the fire departments that we have, and none of that is included or kept with that increase in the population. I think I only have 3 minutes. I think I've probably gone past that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, and I appreciate your using your time wisely. Thank you very much. Any other public comments before we close the public hearing? Okay, public hearing is closed. Thank you very much. Discussion action item is next, and all the comments that were made are on the record and will be, so the first thing we need to do is approve the minutes from our prior meeting. So I need a motion from somebody who was here. I'm going to abstain because I was not at the last meeting, so I'm going to take a motion from somebody in a second.
I'll move that we
Approve the minutes?
approve the minutes, yes.
Okay, sir, and a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second. And we'll take a vote on approving the minutes. And I'm going to abstain because I did not attend the last meeting. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any opposed? And I will abstain. So please record my vote as abstention. Thank you. Thank you. And the next item is review and approve the Surplus Properties Facility Advisory Committee report. And I'm going to turn to Derek, who has been our manager in moving this forward, and he'll provide us a presentation for this item. Mr. Nell.
Thank you, Chairman Miller. And
That's a little, it's getting weird, but yeah.
thanks everybody for being here again tonight. This is our third meeting, and this is the meeting where we're essentially going to review what we've done to date and talk about the final recommendation that staff has drafted for you to take under consideration as this report and recommendation will be brought to the Board of Trustees at a regularly scheduled board meeting, and right now we're hopefully we'll be able to make the April 1st date. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of go through the report that you have, which is a summary of what we've done, and we'll get to the recommendation. I do have the past exhibits on here from the previous meetings report, etc., and we'll have a discussion at that question and discussion period. But by all means, if we're moving along and you guys have a question while I'm presenting the report, please just put up your hand and we'll answer it as we go along. So simply enough, we basically just start out with an introduction that talks about how the Education Workforce Housing Feasibility Study identified multiple properties that were suitable for housing, and then in an effort to keep moving ahead on the development of workforce housing, the staff developed a 4-point plan. Of the 4-point plan, there was one of them was to create this Surplus Property Facility Advisory Committee, which is a process that's required by the state of California when school districts want to declare property as surplus, and defined surplus, essentially it's a property that the school district has determined is never going to need for a school. So this committee was officially formed by the board on December 3rd, following education code, et cetera. The purpose of the committee is laid out in these bullet points here, and I can go through them, but it's something that I'm happy to discuss in more detail if you'd like. But essentially, our goal is to review these properties again, with an eye towards whether or not we're ever going to need them for a school. Along with the creation of the committee, we had to set a schedule and publish the dates of these meetings, and you can see from the list of meetings that we have down there, and we still have scheduled an extra meeting if it's determined it's needed. And all of the meetings are videotaped and on our YouTube channel. Part of the process of creating the committee is the committee membership itself. The state says that we have to basically have a diverse group as possible, that it's a reflection of the community. And then in an effort to get that diverse group of stakeholders and participants for the community, the district went through an extensive recruitment process that included just essentially getting the word out and advertising that we were going to have this committee, and we were seeking membership to participate. And one of the things the state asks us to do, in addition to meet some of the diversity suggestions that are listed in the bullet, but also to find people that have experience with environmental impact reports, legal contracts, building codes, and other land use. And so I think we're going to get to the members. If we get down to the committee members themselves, that your names are listed as members and alternates, and we have an exhibit that shows the level of experience and expertise that each of you have and why you were selected to be on the committee. Essentially then, at this point, we want to go over the meetings themselves. We met for the first time on January 15th, and at that meeting, we had our attorney, James Traber, go over the purpose of the meeting and explain to you, because it's a public process, it's subject to the Brown Act, and there are certain rules that we all have to follow, and what you can talk about. It's sort of, I think of it sometimes as jury duty. When you're here, we talk about it, but when we're not here, you guys, if we can't have a majority of you get together and discuss the items that are on the agenda. And the other business we conducted, our first meeting, was to select a chairperson and vice chairperson, and that was Ross Millerick and Susan Warnick as our vice chair. At our second meeting, which was a little more detailed and involved, but that's when we, staff presented the property parcel reports and evaluation, and we identified the two parcels that we were considering for surplus, and that's the Meadow Park Annex property that's located at 5520 Navi Drive. Got the APN parcel number there, and it was acquired in 1951, and it's the size of that parcel is 1.6 acres. The second site that's under consideration is the San Andreas parcel that's located off of San Andreas and San Marin Drive, and the parcel number for that is there. That parcel was acquired in 1967, and it's 21.6 acres in size. In addition to reviewing the parcels that we went over the school enrollment projections along with the school's capacity, and we talked about how we would handle any future growth if it came. And what we used for that was a school impact fee justification study that was done in May of 24. Our chief financial officer, Jeff Braff, presented some enrollment reports based on his projections, and you have a copy of one of those slides in your report. We also covered a list of the current proposed residential developments, and using a formula that school districts do, built into that justification study that we also reviewed, we updated that justification study to identify about 790 potential students through the K-12 grade level that would come into the district over the next 10 years. So we're never really facing a huge growth in enrollment from future development. And then you also saw a school site classroom capacity report that helped to show how each one of our sites has existing classroom capacity, and goes on to talk about how if we had some growth at a particular school site, one, we have classrooms already available. Two, we have plenty of room on our sites to add portables. And three, there's the ability to adjust our boundaries to accommodate a growth in one area versus another area that might be under a declining enrollment. Where we are now in this part of the report, so we're sort of like the report was written in anticipation of this meeting. We're holding a public hearing, which we just did, and we're going to have me go over this, what we're looking at now, which is the final report and the attached exhibits, which are made up of the items that I mentioned previously from our second meeting. We're going to have James Traber from F3 Law present and explain the concept around the waiver application that we're going to ask you to recommend today, and hopefully we'll be able to we'll come up with a final recommendation, if either what's been drafted by staff, or if the committee would like to discuss it and make changes. That's what we're here to do tonight. And then once we have a final recommendation, we'll go ahead and have a motion and accept and pass that recommendation, move forward, and then we'll have the waiver explanation come up after that. So currently, we're looking at the recommendation. This was presented to you at the last meeting and in a summary conclusion bullet point form. It's sort of a lengthy narrative that if this is acceptable for the committee, we will sort of translate into a traditional resolution, whereas, for example, whereas since we've had these properties for 58 and 74 years respectively, and they've never been needed for a school site, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the reason for the multiple paragraph and the narrative language. But essentially what it gets down to is the highlighted portion that says, therefore, based on careful evaluation, it is recommended that these two parcels be formally declared as surplus properties and initiate the state-required application process for waivers so they can be, meaning the property is repurposed in a manner that better serves the district and the broader community. So that concludes my review of the report and recommendation, and happy to discuss and answer questions.
Questions for Mr. Nell? Okay.
I have one question. As I understand it, our task here is to determine just whether or not the properties are surplus. In reading the purposes of the committee, and then later on in the resolution, it cites these items, but it talks about establishing a priority list of use of the surplus property. In B, and E again talks about the uses of surplus property. So I just kind of would like to have a little thought on that.
Well, we have an explanation for that, and introduce Jim Traber to talk about it. And in layman's term, it's sort of written for all the kinds of variables that all the school districts in the state may face. So it is maybe subject to misinterpretation, but you have to sort of think about how some school districts might have 10 properties under consideration, but they may not actually want to have all 10 declared as surplus properties. So the committee like yours would be trying to prioritize in what order they would be declared, for example, and things along those lines. But I'll let Jim take over.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for your question. So the way that the report is written is similar to the way that the code is written. And what it's getting at is a priority list of use by the school district of spaces that you don't need. And that's kind of a backward way of saying, is there any use that we would have for the property? That's what they're trying to avoid through, and have the reason that we have the committee kind of convened is to make sure, is there anything we would want to keep it for? Is there a use that the school district would have for it? We typically don't get into uses that might come through third parties later on down the road. The way that the code is set up, and I'll talk about this more on the summary of the waiver application, but just by default, we would usually go to like a bid, so you wouldn't have control over what future third-party users would have. Our situation here is going to be a little bit different, hopefully, with the waiver application, but just that's the way that the code is set up, and I understand it's written kind of a little bit backwards and confusingly, but it's about use by the school district of spaces that it doesn't need. Or maybe it's not using.
No worries, Ross. From the same gentleman, I understand that there's a document called the Surplus Properties Act that designates priority uses for properties, and I'm just curious if these properties are declared surplus, particularly the San Andreas site, does the Surplus Property Act apply?
Yeah, so there's something called the Surplus Land Act that it's in the government code, and it applies to everybody as far as public agencies go. And what it would typically require is you put the property on a state clearinghouse website and allow affordable housing developers to bid on it. But because we're a school district, we're typically exempt from that. And part of the reason that we're exempt from that is because the way the code is written is you're exempt from it if the property is subject to a 7-Eleven committee, and that's why we're all here. So, yeah, we're typically exempt from the Surplus Land Act.
Thank you.
Tina, pardon me, I got a little confused by the seating arrangement.
Derek, is it within our purview to, in addition to voting whether or not the property should be surplus, to give a recommendation to the board about how to go about selling the property? Just concerned that, especially with San Andreas, that we don't want the sale to then cause a lot of negativity around whatever projects we use the money for in the future.
Yes, the committee can add comments to the report, and if, I know the committee has had an interest and we've discussed it to a certain degree. It's important to note, to separate the required state legal act of going through a process of declaring the property surplus, but we're certainly more than welcome to add, amongst yourself to come up with some text that would be additional comments that can be part of the report when we present it to the Board of Trustees. Keep in mind that though this committee is recommending things to the Board of Trustees, the Board of Trustees will make the final decision as to what's going to happen. For example, you may recommend to declare the properties as surplus, but they may decide not to do that. And as you know, we've been working on education workforce housing for over a year now. There's been several community meetings. We have an advisory committee meeting group that we meet on a regular basis, and we're more than clear about any kind of development that we would propose to benefit our employees in the district would have to be appropriate for whatever neighborhood it goes into. And happy to answer any other questions about the development process if you'd like. But the answer is yes, you can, amongst yourself, can decide what could be said, and as long as there's consensus for that, we can add it to the report. And we're prepared to do that if you'd like.
Yeah, Derek, so it's my opinion that the district has done an admirable job in the past in dealing and listening to the public and what they feel is best use of our school facilities, et cetera. In light of that, if we were to pass this today, make this motion today, we're a month ahead of schedule. Can that April 1st meeting be moved up so that we can start that process sooner rather than later, hearing what the public has to say?
Well, if I understand your question correctly, there'll be once this committee makes a determination about the disposition of the properties and supports the recommendation as to what that will be, add some potential comments about what they think the board should take into consideration. At the meeting that's currently proposed for April 1st, we will basically just be presenting that to the board at that time for them to accept it. And at that point, they could decide to, actually at that point, they could decide to go ahead and proceed with the waiver and declare the property, or they may decide to set up some additional workshops or hearings or information to help them come to a conclusion as to what to do. But your job basically would be completed by then. But by all means, I mean, I was going to get to the point that hopefully all of you will do your best to attend the meeting when the report is presented. And you can not only we'll have the comments in the reports, but make public comments as well as to the board as to what you think the outcome should be. But essentially, at that point, you're handing off the properties declared as surplus, and it's up to the board now to develop a process how to move forward into what I describe as the development stage of our 6 stages on the education workforce housing plan. So I don't know, I hope that answers
Yeah,
your question.
well, I guess the answer is really for the board, because
Yes, it
they
is.
set their agenda. So right now, it's not scheduled until April 1st, assuming we had another meeting. That's my assumption. If we make those decisions tonight, would it be possible to recommend to the board to move that forward? Is there room in their calendar?
Probably not, because we've already built out our March board meeting agendas, and on an ongoing basis, there's a lot of competition to get on a school board trustee agenda. So that's why I'm hoping we won't need an additional meeting for this committee, and that we can take that place on the April 1st agenda as the soonest that it can be done.
So I talked to Susan Warnicki, and I will both attend the April 1st meeting, so my hope is others will attend as well, but we just conferred and we both have committed to be there to represent the collective interest here. So with that information, are there other comments or discussion items that you want to bring forward? So, yeah, please.
I would just like to, this idea of having comments about our decision and comments about entitling the property before it's sold. I think that's a critical issue that we should try to reach consensus on, in addition to a motion to sell the properties or to declare them surplus.
Other comments? So let me do an attempt to say where we are. First of all, we need to, on the agenda, we have a presentation from the attorney. Do you want to go through that now, or we're going to start having a conversation here? Okay, okay. Oh, your item is the waiver, which is a separate item, correct, okay. So the item for the conversation, there's two, the way I understand it, and Mr. Nell's gonna twist my arm if I got this wrong. There's two things that that are presented to us, or we present back to the district. First is this property actually surplus from the educational needs of the community? And we've all been selected because we're informed citizens from multiple communities to speak to that topic. And so the question is, do we have, the current enrollment of the district is 7,200 kids, something like that. We got a charter school of 500. So we're sitting at 7,500 total public school kids in Novato. That's been pretty, for the time I've lived in this town, it's 500 students less than when I moved to Novato. It's been pretty stable. That's one question. Do we need more physical space? You guys heard presentations about somebody went and actually looked at the campuses, went to San Ramon, went to Olive, went to Hamilton, and the presentation was there's adequate space up to, I think the number was 9,000 as a guessing number for students, so we're probably okay. So the first question I think is, do we think, not do they think, do we think the school district needs the property for academic educational purposes? And I think that's the first question. Is that
That's
accurate?
correct. There's consensus on proceeding with recommending the properties as surplus, then I guess we'd establish that, followed by
But
whether staff's
there's-
language is.
They're surplus because we don't need them for educational purposes,
That's
right?
correct.
They're not surplus because we don't need them for a
Actually, for
grocery
school
store or-
site purposes,
For school site purposes, okay.
specific to building another school.
Right. So is that correctly the
That's-
first question?
That's the first question, and then whether or not staff's draft of the recommendation wording is adequate, and if that's the case, that's fine, and then we could get into the comment section, and I could pull up a Google Doc here, and Leslie's volunteered to help me with typing, trying to put together, as you guys try to come up with a couple of points along the lines of, you think the property should be entitled prior to any sale or lease. I heard that comment, for example.
So the first question is, is anybody here anybody on the committee think that this property needs to be kept by the school district for school district educational use, based on everything we know about Novato community? Nobody. So the committee, so this is I'm not gonna take a vote because but as a straw poll, I don't see any hands going in there to say, we need to say this just in case. There might be, none of us think that. So I'm taking that as consensus. And then the second question I think that Mr. Nell has raised is, are there revisions that we think we want to make and basically tell the school board in this document, which is the document we're going to send forward, and you should all have a copy of it, is there any revisions that we want to make to signal to the school board our intentions beyond the recommendation which we just agreed to? So we can have, as you're suggesting, Leslie can bring it up on a screen and we can look at it, and if there's any revisions we want to make in it, so it provides different direction to the 7-member board. So is there, and we've heard some comments from the audience. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm a little confused. It seems to.
Trying to fix that.
Yeah.
So that's not good.
It seems to me we should be making a vote on whether it's surplus or not, and then add comments, that would lead the school board in a direction for the surplus property, for what they're going to do.
So what I don't want to do is pull a vote on something that is not in writing, that's not in front of us. What I would like to do is get a vote that says, here's our report and we all approve this report. That's where I'm trying to get to. So that, my intention by asking for a straw poll was, do we agree at the first point, which is it's surplus, because that gives us the foundation for conversation. With guidance from our attorney, if you think we should have a vote on that first issue, but it seems to me our spoken instruction to the board is this document. And I want to make sure I frame this correctly, and I have an attorney to help me, so I'll take advantage of that.
So the action item on the agenda is to approve the report. And so we've taken a shot at what we think the report should have, but if you all would like to make changes to the report before you approve it, that's certainly something that you can do. I heard someone say that they would like to recommend to the board that the property be entitled. That would be an example. So you could recommend that we make that change, and then someone could move to approve the report subject to those changes. So
Dean, does that meet, I want to make sure you're clear about what we're doing, because this is a big deal. This is property, long-term property investment in this town, so.
I'm clear. So somebody who wants to make a comment on what they think they should direct the board or suggest to the board,
Yeah.
then that's what they
Change
should do.
to this report.
Right.
This is how we're speaking, is this report, and you should all have a hard copy of it. So Leslie, do you want to, if we proceed, if I have her bring it up and then we go paragraph by paragraph, I'm expecting not many changes, but that's one guy's opinion. Let's give him a minute.
it's all wrapped up in the report. So there's just one item, and it's to approve this report. And so do we want to approve the report as it currently sits? Or would someone like to move to make certain changes to
What
that?
we would like to do is go through this report paragraph by paragraph, section by section, and say, yes, 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 no, revision. And I think most of this is pretty simple, yes. Like committee membership, no one's gonna contest, but if we could just go title, heading by heading, and that way we'll know we've covered it.
Okay, so again, I'm going to reiterate that the first thing is to approve the report and decide on the wording of the recommendation. If for those of you who are thinking about making a recommendation as to what to do after it's declared surplus, those are going to be additional comments below this recommendation. So trying to build in what to do with it into the recommendation to declare it surplus would be cumbersome, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So that's where we're at. But so we've got a. Do you have the complete recommendation? Yeah, that's it. We have the complete recommendation in a doc file, and then we also have a blank comments tab that we can add to the report.
I want to make sure that I'm helping this group see what they can choose to change. You know, so I mean, my proposal was we start with the word, the section introduction.
Yeah, that's
And I
right.
would assume nobody wants to make a change to the introduction section, right? Right,
They also all have the report in front of them,
yep,
so you could just start going through it.
yeah. And my guess is there's gonna be a section we'll get to where the changes all occur, but you're telling us this is our voice, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's your report, so if there's anything in the report that you want to change, we can do that. And then,
so,
can we get, yeah.
Susan?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I did see this as I was reading this earlier. Under purpose of the committee, letter D, make a final determination of limits of tolerance of use of space in real property. That's very legalese. James, can you define that? Clarify what that means.
So this all is going back, similar to what the earlier comment was. This is all going back to the district's uses of space and the district's uses of its property. This language is meant to mirror the Ed Code, which is that reference
Okay.
up above 17390. And so what they're trying to say is you make a final determination, which is in your report, about the uses of space in real property. And ultimately, just to close the loop on that, right now, the report right now, as it's currently written, would say that the recommendation is that the board find it to be surplus to the district's needs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm taking no changes. Dale, pardon me.
Well, before we go through that exercise, we've had, after the comments were made, we've had additional information presented to us. It may be moot. Everybody's now decided that it doesn't need to be in here. It should be in a different document. So we might want to revisit, does anybody want to amend it before we go through that process? Does that make sense?
So you're saying, ask the question, does anybody want to make a change to this
There
at
were-
all?
Right, there were two comments made by two members that appeared to want to make comments. Do they still, because you've made some further explanation, do they still want to consider it?
That would short circuit this process, and I'm happy to just, so my question is, does the committee want to go through this section by section? I thought it would have been pretty efficient, but, or, I mean, what's the other alternative? We are gonna look at this at least in the couple of sections for sure, recommendations, and is there any, I mean, the other simple question, is there any changes at all? Susan? Well, pardon me, Dale, let me take her comment and then return to you.
No, I'm
Well,
good.
I was just gonna comment on Dawn's, on your, don't necessarily have a dialogue back and forth, but your concern or your recommendation on having the property entitled. First of all, I don't think everybody understands what it means to entitle a property, so that should be defined. That's not permitted. That's getting a project, actually a real project approved. In the planning world, and I think you do have a background in planning, but my understanding is that without a developer, you don't want to entitle a property because you entitle a property that nobody wants to build. And I spent 6 years on the planning commission. I approved dozens of projects that never got built because they didn't pencil out. So I think that's a conversation that we have with the board as this moves through. My sense is that the first step is to identify these properties as surplus. Then I know the attorney is going, the next item is this waiver, which I have questions about, because going to the RFP process is really a great way to do this, assuming that, I mean, we will have this conversation next, but assuming that, I'm guessing that has to be approved by some state board. So I think what happens, I think my real questions are gonna be, what is the process gonna look like as it plays out? And I think that's what we're all concerned about. How our neighborhood's going to be communicated. We have neighbors in San Marin here. obviously Damon, who didn't go through this 15 years ago. Damien, this is how I got here. That site. So there is a process. I think we all need to better understand what that's going to look like. It's going to make everybody feel a lot more confident that, like, does it get entitled or not? What is this going to look like? What's the impact? There were questions about infrastructure. And a lot of those plans were already made with the city. So there's a lot of information that I think all of us are going to need to feel comfortable with this moving forward. So, I mean, I would recommend that we approve this because still, if we're all interested, we're going to follow this through with the board because the board will be the final decision maker on this, and even the RFP process, if that's the route they're going to go. So I think that's just kind of my comments. I'm a researcher. I do all my research. I want more information is better than not enough, and I think generally speaking, people are going to want a lot of information. Your comments are great because yes, if the neighborhood doesn't know, trust me, I've lived through nightmare after nightmare of screaming people, and it's the worst. And I just going to say this, that I really believe in moving Novato forward, and it has been frustrating. One of the reasons I did not run for city council again is that things take too long. And I think oftentimes we belabor over things and then it gets built like Vintage Oaks and we're like, oh, how do we live without that? Oh my God, that's amazing. So great stuff can happen, and it always happens because we're all involved and we all have great ideas and we're really forthcoming with them. So anyway, I just wanted to word vomit that out, but I think there's a lot more coming, and we all, even when this is not meeting anymore, we all still need to stay engaged. So those are my comments.
So can I try this? Let's see, we seem like we want to move a little faster. So instead of, if we do this, we take this report, which is our voice, and we take every section up through the end of page 4, which goes, not including recommendations, it's everything else, and we say we're okay with it, and then we leave ourselves a discussion for recommendations. Does that move us forward faster and still leave in front of us the topic of recommendations? Don?
I would just like to move approval of the report.
The whole
approval of the whole thing, and then we can discuss comments that we might add as far as entitlements and that sort of thing. Anything that we could come up with as consensus for additional information. I think the basic body of the report is sound, and I'm prepared to move the approval of the report at this point.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Dale seconds that motion. So now we have a motion on the table, which takes this report as is and says we approve it. It doesn't have any additional comments or recommendations. It's this thing, and if I didn't hear you, what I heard you say is we're gonna have a separate conversation for something else. This report gets approved as is. And if everybody's, yeah, I'm sorry, sir, it's a committee discussion at this point. If the committee is fine with that, is any discussion about that approach? Any concerns? If not, we'll call for a vote on that motion.
So now I'm gonna stop you. My attorney advises me. So I think we're in a pretty good place right now. I think it's pretty clear to the committee that they feel like the property should be declared as surplus. The justifications are all there in the report. The wording on the recommendation is only about why we're declaring it as surplus. Now it's time, before you approve the report, to come up with these comments that you will agree on. It's simply going to say comments, and then there'll be bullet points under that, and we're going to put that under the recommendation in the final report, and then you should approve the report. So the concept was, here's a draft report and recommendation. The committee said, let's add some comments to it, and that's where we're at. So it's I would say that it's time for the committee to debate those comments, and just from my perspective, it was like there was a suggestion to bring entitlements into the process, and then there was some comments about whether or not that was something that was should or shouldn't be in this report. And that's something that you guys are going to have to work out amongst yourself. But I'm happy to discuss the district's position on entitlements if you guys have questions about that particular comment that's been suggested. And there was another suggestion as to what you guys thought you might want to have on it, and I would let the chairman take over on that.
So what I heard through Mr. Nell from our attorney is if we approve this as is, we have basically closed the door on us being able to make recommendations. And I know some of us want to make recommendations. So I would propose that while, Don, the census is, everything here is fine, I would like to have you either withdraw the motion or have us vote it down and allow us to have that conversation as an additional section, and then have you reintroduce the motion. But if you,
I'll withdraw the motion, and
Okay.
we'll hopefully have that discussion.
okay, so we're now down to, everybody likes this, we're now gonna have a conversation about conditions and, so what I need to do is have somebody, is there something up on the board we can start editing, and what were the topics we wanted to?
Leslie's volunteered
Mr. Nelmy,
to
could
act
you
as
remind us what the items were?
So it's
Yeah.
actually, sure.
So I'm sort of sorry for even asking the question
I'm
to
here to
begin with.
answer. I'm here to answer
We're-
questions.
hey, this is
It's
public
your
process.
meeting. I'm here to answer questions. So if you have a question, I'll be happy to answer it.
So I'm not personally interested in entitlements. I think that's sort of beyond our scope here. My concern is that the board, and as Dale said, the board historically has done this, so maybe it's not a huge concern, work very closely with these two communities to make sure that the people that live there, the people that go to school near Hamilton, both of those communities are very much aware and on board as much as possible with what is going to happen with the properties, so that we are not baking negativity into this whole process. I don't know how you.
Baking negativity is pretty clear language.
I don't know if that's a recommendation that can be made. Just work closely with the communities.
We're gonna work this as a committee. So, Mr. Klein?
Yeah, that's a recommendation that can be added.
I agree with you on that. The only thing I would say is that the board continues to work with the community, in making sure that we're clear that they have in the past. This isn't something new we're asking.
So,
Yeah, that's
can
good.
I ask the word continuing to work with the community be added to our draft document? Is everybody? Yeah, okay. I mean, I can't.
Can I just add to that
Yeah,
comment?
no,
Out of
absolutely.
a spirit of charity that, I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone here, but we can even say the committee itself would be happy to help in that process of reaching out to neighborhoods.
My issue is, once we hand this off, we are now advisory, we don't get to constrain the process. Sitting here,
Yeah.
we have authority, and while we are still be community citizens, we're now gonna be at a microphone with 3 minutes, and the relationship will be different. So I'm fine with that, because I think we have a really sound board that's going to look out for the community's interest. Personally, I think that's true, but that's a statement of faith, not fact. And I don't want us to step away from the authority that we have without understanding that that's a trend that changes the relationship, and maybe for the better, but it changes it. So
I just think it would be appropriate to offer our help in some way.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Any other comments Susan?
I just have some language. I mean, you could have something in there that says include a robust community outreach. And then, Dawn, if you're still interested in the entitling projects, you could have a statement like, consider the pros and cons of entitling parcels before selling. And that way it's included in there, just so, have them look at it, the pros and cons of doing it.
We will do that.
I think that general language is probably good. my experience as a computer consultant working for property developers in Portola Valley was that you get nothing for raw land, but once it's divided up in the lots, once you have things like electricity and plumbing and all, the value of that property goes up. And our point is to do workforce housing, not just dump property at the lowest value. So.
Like I said, we did do that in Novato, and we got some AB 2011 projects. Anyway.
Dean?
I would like the wording that Susan spoke about, having it give the board the direction to make sure that they study the possibility of entitlements. I originally would have liked to have seen entitlements, but that probably ties their hands, more than need be, and we know that the board is going to study this. It's essentially, in my mind, above our purview, but it's also a valid comment. So I'd like to see that the board study the pros and cons of entitling the property to achieve the best value.
I'm going to speak my experience is we sold San Carlos without entitlements and left money on the table. That's 30 years ago, and that was a travesty. Timing was such that so I would like to encourage the board to remember that lesson and be more thorough in their comments and their research going forward. So I can concur with your comments.
Yeah, and I guess secondly, with regard to the entitlements, what it does in my mind is it kind of sets the tone for the property. I mean, if it is going to be entitled, if the board decides to entitle it, then that's what's going to go on the property, and that might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing.
Yeah, I'm here to answer questions, but just, the word entitlements itself comes with an entire process that includes the public. Mm-hmm. So when we're going to research it, just so letting you guys know that is a big involved process, and the community will have input at that point.
Question over
Other
here.
committee comments? Yes, sir.
Ross. So if the property is declared surplus and it goes through the RFP process, is there a fiduciary responsibility at play to get the highest and best value for the land, or what's the obligation there?
Yeah, so after this committee does its work, and then it goes to the board, and we'll talk about the waiver process here in a moment, but what you're saying kind of dovetails with that conversation. So the waiver that comes down from the State Board of Education, they approve it with conditions, and those conditions typically say that the board has to select the proposal that best meets the needs of the district, and they have to do it in a public meeting. But part of how the board will select what property to use is going to be A, living in the RFP, and B, dependent upon the types of proposals that it receives. So there may be, and this is part of the art of why we want the waiver and why we want the RFP process, because you could have a property like that is the most profitable and generates the highest amount of money, but that may not be the one that you want for a host of reasons. Maybe you just don't want what they're selling in that parcel right there. So that waiver that we're about to talk about in the next item, but it relates to this conversation, is there to give you some control so that, yeah, you get the best value, but you're not necessarily like tied to the highest bid regardless of what they're talking about.
Okay, thanks.
So to add my understanding to this point is we might choose as a community, this is community-owned property, that we want no more than 3-story high buildings in San Andreas or 2-story high buildings in San Andreas. We might choose that as those people, the board might choose that. If somebody comes in with 6-story or 10-story high buildings, then they can show it's a highest and best use because they can get the most revenue. We want this public board to have the choice to serve the community without having to take the highest and best dollar offer as it's going to happen in some other parts of this community. The difference here is the parcel's owned by a public agency elected by this community, and we have some influence. And I think that dramatically changes the discussion we can have. And I'm looking to my legal counsel, and he's got thumbs up. Yes, that's an opportunity for Novato to get what we want, not what's been some regional transportation authority says we have to do it because it's next to a train station that, et cetera. So.
But in the context of selling surplus property, right, the buyer can do whatever they want with it.
The point is, as a public agency, the board can put constraints on it, so that's not always true, I think. And now I'm
through the
talking
waiver
like an attorney.
process.
Yeah.
Through the waiver process, we will be in a better control to ask for, through the request for proposal process, ask for, let's use developers, for example, to come up with a plan that we think is appropriate for the community, and then try to get the best deal of that, as opposed to just saying, having an auction and having an affordable high-density developer come in who wants to put 14 seven-story apartment buildings in there. That would be the highest bid. Well, we don't necessarily want to be in a position where we're forced to take that. We want to be in a position that we can be instrumental in what goes on the property after it's declared surplus.
We're short mics.
So if I understand correctly, and it dovetails with your comment, it might even be through the waiver and an RFP that the school district finds a developer that's willing to work collaboratively, say, just for example, on the San Andreas site, and create something that complements the existing community and resonates with those folks, along with providing teacher workforce housing that could be maintained possibly as rentals, possibly below market rate housing. It could be a collaboration of sorts.
Indeed, and that's why I'm happy to summarize the position of the board going forward, but we do have a full year worth of meetings and collaborations and discussions around what we're talking about right now, but it sort of narrows down to, if you don't mind me saying so, the board, myself, all of you have to live in this town. So whatever it is we're going to do with these properties are going to have to be appropriate for the neighborhoods they're in, as opposed to a pure profit developer concept that could, which is what we want to avoid by taking the waiver process.
Tina, my concern is, I hear that we're gonna end up with 6-story high buildings down on Grant Avenue because there was, in spite of all the local officials that sit on the city council, they had no legal choice. They had no legal choice except to accept those. In this case, the property is owned by a public agency, and with that, I think the board can make different choices and constrain the development. I'm talking like I'm an attorney, and I'm not. And I have one sitting here, and I would like, I guess, somebody to tell me that this is a reasonable point of view, because we're counting on being able to control the destiny of this town a little bit here.
Yeah, so I think at this point in time, it's very early with respect to what might happen on that property. I think you raised a great point. It's true. We could have a situation where there's a collaborative development, and part of that development is housing for our workforce, and part of it is market rate housing for other folks that are in the community. Is that going to happen and be viable? I don't know as I stand here right now, but that's part of the reason for doing the waiver the way that we're proposing doing it. As far as controlling what can be done on the property, there are ways to record restrictions against the property that would restrict development there in certain ways. With that being said, I think probably the most powerful way that you can control it is through that RFP process, where you're selecting someone that you trust, that has given you, a fair amount of confidence that that's where their plans for the development of that parcel are consistent with what your vision is for that area in the community.
So my 2 cents is Dominican community got surprised by a property that was sold thinking they were gonna get 2 or 3 houses and are getting multiple orders, 10s or 20s houses. So whatever the school board does needs to understand that there are people who will tell you one thing and then do another. And so those constraints need to be, with advice from the council, structured in a way that they can be enforced.
That's why I'm here, Ross.
Yeah, well, yeah, so, me too. Did we address the topic you raised? I'm gonna,
Yeah, no, I think there's more control than I had assumed. I thought we had to take the highest and best offer. And it just seems like there's 2 competing interests, right? We want the best development for the area, but that gets us not the highest market value, which is in the fiduciary interest of the children of the school district, gets us more money to put in other facilities. So there's these 2 kind of lines. Oops, excuse me. It's for the school board, I guess, to make that decision to go with the best offer.
with the best for the community, not the highest and best financial.
They have
not
latitude.
only,
Yeah, they have latitude in making that decision, which I wasn't clear on.
He's saying we have latitude, or where they have latitude, we don't,
The board does.
Yeah, the board does.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Comments more? Tina, you okay? Okay. You guys? So here's the comments we're gonna add to this report. Are you okay with the way it's authored? Do you have any final edits you wanna make? Are you? Well, I can't see it, so you're my attorney's standing in the way. Oh. So maybe you can just read it, it's short enough to.
Yeah, so it says the board continues, these are additional, so assuming this is where we want to go, the move after this is that someone would move to approve the report as amended to include these comments. And these comments are that the board continues to work with the communities so they are aware of the potential developments of the properties. Number 2 is that we include a robust community outreach, and community members are encouraged to participate in reaching out to the communities. Number 3 is consider the pros and cons of entitling the properties for the properties before the potential sale or lease of the properties. I'm going to take out some extra words that we've got here.
Committee members?
Can I just,
Yeah, Susan?
I'm sorry, 12 years of Catholic school. If you need any paperwork proofed. So when you say the board continues to work with the communities, when you say communities, you mean the communities that are surrounding the sites, adjoining the sites. But I think somebody else also mentioned people affected in not necessarily living, but affected in other capacities. But I would at least be specific, saying the communities surrounding the sites, adjoining the sites, something like that.
Including, because we can't exclude people.
Right, including, yeah, absolutely, you gotta keep it open, so,
Just an emphasis that it includes people, the
yeah.
neighbor.
And you can just say the community, meaning the community at large, because other people throughout the community are gonna, it affects them too. I mean, even the San Andreas site, people who have to travel San Marin Drive to get to their job or whatever, there could be an impact. And then it says community members are encouraged to participate in reaching out to the communities. That's a little convoluted. So community members are encouraged to participate.
I think it was originally committee members.
Committee members. Okay, there you go. That's right. Okay, there you go. That's it.
We're not gonna let you guys go. Now you're.
Other edits? Take a look. This is it. So, Don, I think we're back to you, and your motion was to approve this with these amendments added after recommendations?
So moved.
Okay, anybody else have any other revisions they want to make or suggest, or then we're ready for a vote? I need a second?
I'll second again.
Dale seconded the first time, he seconded again, okay? Okay, all the committee members in favor of this recommendation? Yes, opposed? Did you guys vote? No, you voted, okay. Oh, you just kvetch?
They can vote advisory.
Okay, no, you're the alternates, no wonder I'm confused, okay. Okay, kvetch is good. So I think you got you don't have none opposed. Okay. And we have a record of who's in attendance. We had one member absent, I believe. Okay. Okay. So I think we're on to, so that closes that item. Mr. Nell, thank you. And
So I'm just,
we're moving on to approval of submission of waiver, I believe is our next topic item.
That's correct. So, sorry that you all have hard copies in front of you, and what's up on the screen is obviously very difficult to read, but in case we need to reference a page number or something like that, we can use the screen. And Jim is basically just wants to explain to you, the rationale behind it, and then we've already sort of covered it as well. So I'll turn it back over to Jim.
Thanks, sir.
So this is just further to what we've kind of already talked about. But I'll set the table by saying, by default in the ed code, when we sell a piece of property, we're supposed to put it out to a hard bid and take the highest price. So what happens in practice is you get a number of bidders that come in and submit numbers, and then at the actual school board meeting, you have like an oral auction where you continually try to seek more money, basically. And if someone has a higher bid, you have to take that if it's over a certain relatively small threshold. Most school districts that I've worked with that are selling surplus property do not do that auction process. And the reason is because, as you can imagine, you just don't get the best result. It's difficult to work with a developer or someone that would want to buy the property. Almost always, if you put yourself in the shoes of the person that's buying it, there are certain things about the property that they want to know before they can give you a price. The fewer unknowns about the property, the higher the price goes. That's typically like a rule as far as developers will go. And so if you can step away from the auction process by using the waiver, that gives you the opportunity to have more of a partnership with someone, whoever that person may be or entity may be, to make sure that you get the best price for the property. This also will include probably a longer due diligence period where you're sharing information about the property and probably more of a collaborative process. So what you see are it's a summary of the waiver application. This is what I submit to the state. And the waiver changes. The things that we're trying to not have to do include that oral auction, include the submission of hard copy bids prior to that oral auction, making offers to other public agencies for the property. These are all things that we want the state basically to give us flexibility to act more like a private property owner to make sure that we can get the best bang for our buck, and make sure that the property is used in a way that's consistent with what the board desires. So I don't know, these waivers only last a year. I don't know that we will be in a position to do this all within a year. So fair warning, and I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, we may need to reconvene at some point and reapprove this waiver application because the state is kind of particular about that. But for right now, I thought here we are at this meeting, why not just do this? And then if it does come to fruition, then we don't have to reconvene. So that's really a summary of the item. We're just asking, the state will ask me to show that I've shown you this and that you have any comments or approve it. Hopefully you'll approve it, and that'll give the board some flexibility on how it treats the property.
Be clear, do you need a motion and an action item on this?
Yes.
Because what I have is just the text, but I don't have do I have a cover sheet that's an action item? Maybe I do. Okay, I do. Okay. Any questions for the presenter? Susan?
Sorry, lots of questions. Okay, so with what you just described, because as soon as I saw this, I thought, oh boy, the state's got to go back and forth with you. Is it typically like a back and forth on the waiver, or?
No, these waivers are pretty routine. They approve them quite a bit. So pretty much like I mentioned, I think better than 90% of the property deals that I'm involved with schools have always gone through this waiver. And as long as we check all the boxes, such as conferring with the committee, we've got to confer with the unions, and we have to submit the application appropriately, they will approve it.
And the reason I ask is because in the time that I started working on this site in 2010 to now, there has just been monumental legislation, housing legislation at the state level. And I guess my concern is that there was a push to build housing. I mean, do they ever ask you what you want to use it for? Or, I mean, is there?
That's correct. Yeah.
So it's not the state, it's the Board of Education.
It's the state.
So they don't have,
The same.
they have no skin in that game. Okay.
It's
All
just
right.
the State Board of Education. So the Ed Code actually says they have to approve the waiver unless they make certain findings, and 9 times out of 10 or better, they don't make those findings with respect to surplus property sales.
So then likely what they're looking at is that you've done the research that there isn't really a need for the land for future schools. That's probably more where they're coming from.
It's really, what they're looking for is, did you follow the procedural steps to get the waiver submitted, more than anything, yeah.
Well, it sounds much easier than things that I've had to deal with.
It is much easier than
I'm sure that it is, yeah.
planning commissioner, city
Oh,
council.
my God.
Yes.
Thank you.
Public education now.
Yeah,
We
thank
have our
you.
own complications.
Yeah, we have our own problems.
We have our own problems,
Thank you.
but they're not
I
those
appreciate
problems.
that.
Other committee questions? Even the kibitzers, any questions? Tina?
I just want to clarify again, because I come from more of Susan's bailiwick, and so this is fascinating to me that what the waiver appears to allow you to do is to supersede the issues that are raised by the Surplus Land Act, which now primarily focuses on affordable housing, but focuses on it similar to the process that we're seeing in downtown Novato, where AMG is coming in with 5- and 6-story buildings. That this process, because it goes through the California Board of Education, actually gives the school board, in combination with the community, a chance to create something old school, so to speak. What you all were trying to do, Susan, in the past, right? When you were doing things in Ross. And so I had no idea this existed. I sat on the committee thinking, oh God, AB 2011, and even though there's not a smart station within 500 feet, we're still gonna have to deal with that. So this is wonderful. This is an alternative that really creates an opportunity if there's a response to the RFP. The other thing I hear you saying, though, is if, say, in the first year there aren't enough developers that are interested in partnering potentially with the school, you can go back and get another waiver.
This is true. Yeah, I don't anticipate, there being a lack of developers. I think more of the time that it will take to study things like entitlements and planning for the site. That's my concern about the 1 year. And just to clarify what we're talking about, so the waiver that we're talking about tonight gets us through like the education code auction.
Okay.
The fact that the school districts convened the 7-Eleven committee is what gets us through the Surplus Land Act. So.
Thank you. And I had, again, wonderful education you're giving us by being here and answering all the questions. Thank you.
Other committee comments? With that, we're down to the point where I'm looking for a motion to adopt the waiver. And the actual language is staff recommends approval of the submission of waiver application to the State Board of Education regarding surplus property. I'm looking for a motion.
I move to adopt, I move to adopt the waiver.
I didn't.
As David.
Oh, David, thank you. Pardon me, I didn't see. And a second, please?
I'll second.
Then Don, okay, second. We have a first and a second.
Go ahead.
Oh. You good? Okay, I guess we're down to vote. Any other, if not, we're all in favor of the motion to set the waiver? All opposed? None? Hearing none? Okay, so I think we're down, we finished the majority of our business tonight. I think now it's a question of, do we need to meet again? Mr. Nell, do you want to give us a conversation, give some dialogue about, do we need one more meeting, or are we done for now, or Maybe in a year we have to meet again, I heard. Thank you for the invitation.
We are done. We do not need to meet again, and we do not need to have a motion to that effect, but essentially just wanted to make sure that it was clear to everyone that we don't need to meet on that March 12th tentative date.
So on April 1st, whatever day it comes before the board, currently April 1st, it has to get scheduled through agenda planning.
Yeah,
Susan and I will be there. You're all welcome. Would you make sure?
I'll
the
make sure that
announcements get
everyone
to
gets
everybody?
invited to let them know when it's going to be presented to the board and what that board report looks like. You'll have that in advance as well.
Okay. Is there?
And we'd like everyone, to come, and hopefully we'll get, at a minimum, have our chair and vice chair help present that report.
With that, is there any other comments before we adjourn the meeting?
Yes, we do have to go over the minutes, and Ellen's going to take over as a matter of business. This meeting has minutes, but because we're not going to have another meeting, Ellen's going to describe how we're going to process and get those minutes approved by our board.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you. So yes, so we took motions tonight. You all voted on things, but that has to be official, right? So you don't have another meeting, so how do you approve the minutes? So what's going to happen next? And also I want to just clarify that minutes, when you see them, are an official record of the meeting. So you're going to see a first, you're going to see a second, you're going to see who voted. It'll be a roll call vote each and every time. They're not a transcript of the meeting. So you're never going to see committee member X said this, committee member Y said that. An official recording on YouTube is the transcript. So just, if you've never read minutes before, I just want to clarify that. So I will type up the minutes, and by the end of this week or early next week, I will email them to all of you. And what I need from you is to just respond to me. I'll blind copy all of you, so you don't do the whole reply all. You just respond to me, I approve or not. And once I have quorum, once I have 6 of you, a majority of you have voted yes, I will reach out to Ms. Wernick and ask her to come in and sign those official minutes that we'll have printed. Then I will put them on the regular Board of Trustees meeting agenda under consent for them to accept your approved minutes. So they're not approving your minutes because you're approving your minutes. They're accepting your minutes. And then after that, we'll post them on the website so that the public can see them officially. Does that make sense?
Questions?
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to adjourn. My understanding is we may get called again a year from now as this committee with the same alternates, and depending on how fast, if we can, get the attorney to work faster, we'll see. But other than that, we've done our duty to the community, and I think it's a thank you from the faculty, the staff, and leadership of the
Very
district.
grateful, thank you.
And with that, I need a motion to adjourn? Nope. Just adjourn? Okay, we're adjourned. Okay.